And if you think about one of the main characters in our book is Glenn Morris, who was the decathlete who ended up having a torrid romance with Leni Riefenstahl, and then going on to win the gold, like shocking the world
Think he had a
in
good
the
month?
decathlon.
Think he had a
No
good month?
kidding.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. My name is Mike Prada. I'm your host of the 60-Minute Podcast because no good story can't be told in 60 minutes. And here we are. I'm with Rick Kaufman today, who just published a book called Played, The Games of the 1936 Berlin Olympics. Rick, we have a partner named Glenn. He's not here. Why don't you tell us about your partnership between you guys and why you wrote the book, and let's get to it.
Sure, of course. Thanks for having me on. Glenn and I have known each other since college, and we were fraternity brothers, and we were always interested in film and writing. Then I moved to LA, and he finished up school, and then when I went back to the East Coast, you know, started writing together, and we were in the middle of making this feature film that we wrote, produced, I acted in. I was walking around New York City, and I went into one of those old-fashioned magazine stores, that used to have magazines from all over the world and newspapers
Sure.
from all over the world. So I grabbed this one magazine that was from 36, and it was from Germany, and it was all about the Olympics. And I said, my God, this is very much like the story that my great uncle would tell me, who back in 36, he was one of the number one, if not the best, downhill skier in
Wow.
all of Germany. And he was told he could not participate in the Winter Olympics because he was a Jew. And that was
Oh,
also being held in Germany that year. So, and he really regretted that.
of
And
course.
he told me while I was growing up how much he regretted it. So I brought this magazine on the set to Glenn and I said, hey, man, we need to do this. And at first, now this is going back like 25 years.
Right.
And at first, he was really interested in the way I was saying, with the mix in sports, there's a lot here. But over the last, 20, 25 years, as we were researching it, these stories, just all these stories about the
Incredible.
athletes, about the event coordinators, about the politicians, it all started to come together, and it was one dramatic story after another, and one was topping the other, and it didn't matter from what angle it was coming from. They were just amazing stories. And so we thought, you know what? We were always big fans of Robert Altman, and we like the way he weaves stories together in his
Sure.
films, multiple stories, and that's what we wanted to do here. So we originally wrote it as a limited series, and as we were getting it together, we were very close to getting it made. And one of our producers said, you guys really need to write the book on this because you have half a novel here.
Yep.
And at first we bought, deal fell through. You know what? Let's write the book.
It's great.
And so we did. And it was a journey. I think the book took us about 2.5 years, maybe a little
I'm
longer,
sure.
maybe a little longer.
I'm sure.
But the research was much longer. But yeah, that was how we did it. Glenn and I have written quite a few things together, a lot of scripts together, and so we're used to doing it. And we thought, let's just take on this novel, and we're so pleased with it.
It's great. It was such a pleasure to read. When I talked to your publicist a few months ago when I was starting this podcast, I was looking for the most interesting people I could have, with the most interesting stories, and right away I saw this with the Olympics coming up around the corner. It couldn't get any more perfect.
Yeah,
So
it's great timing.
so we can circle back to you and Glenn, but let's dive into this Olympics. This is one of the most fascinating Olympics in the history of the games. There's so many things going on here. Hence your title, the games. The games they play, which we don't even talk. We're not even talking about the athletic field of what's going on.
Exactly.
So the decision to go to Germany with this came in about 1931. Is that fair to say? Before Nazis rose to power, that Germany already threw
Exactly.
their hat in.
Yeah, exactly. So the IOC granted Germany the Olympics in 1931, and that was about 2 years before the Nazis started to take hold. And, it was still the Weimar Republic. But, there was horrible inflation and there was tons of poverty. And so the people were looking for something different. I mean, obviously, they
Sure.
were hoping for something very different. And yeah, so and that's the great thing about this book. It goes between 1931 and 1936, and that was the beginning of the hysteria. And there is not a lot of known facts and how lives were lived, and so we really wanted to like immerse the reader into
Yep.
this time period, and we wanted the characters to show their everyday lives and how they were manipulating and trying to just live their lives through this craziness, all leading up to the Olympics.
Absolutely. You talk about that in the book. Let's talk about this because this is something I think the common person doesn't realize, and it's so easy in hindsight to say, but in 1932, before the rise, what's the average German citizen feeling about themselves, feeling about the society, feeling about their country? Why were they so susceptible to believe what they believed?
Well, like I said, they were so poor. The Versailles Treaty had pretty much choked the economy of Germany, and they couldn't move forward, or they just couldn't figure out how to move forward, and they were looking for some sort of quick answer. And I mean, Hitler was just so manipulative, and just they were just ripe for the taking.
Sure. So what's Hitler's grand plan of this? Because he sees the 32 Olympics in Los Angeles.
Yep.
He marvels at it. And does he think we've already maybe seen the most grandiose Olympics? We can do bigger. We can do better. Is that
Well,
what he's thinking?
well, it's funny because even during 32, during that Olympics, Hitler, he was apathetic. He didn't really see it as Joseph Goebbels saw it. And Goebbels was the head of propaganda. And it was Goebbels who really persuaded Hitler to go for it. And,
Okay.
really understand the importance of what could be done with an Olympics. It helps that the American Olympic president, Avery Brundage, was sympathetic to all of his causes, and he's our main antagonist in the book, and he's just as evil as any Nazi. And he was
Right.
friendly with a lot of them on the German Olympic Committee that served also on the IOC, because he had done Olympics. He had participated in Olympics with them when they were younger. And so, and he was a known anti-Semite, nothing fazed him. His main purpose was to be on the IOC. And he knew that he had to go to Berlin to get that done.
Got it.
And indeed, that is what happened.
And how does that come through bribes? Is that through favors? Like
Yeah,
how does that
all
get you?
all of that. His cajoled his way through that, vote. The vote to go, whether America should go, is a large part of our book. The way he just made that go his way is pretty sickening. And it could have changed world history. And that's one of the things that we really question in the book. In the beginning of the book is, if we didn't go, would the Holocaust have ever happened? Would the war machine have grown the way it did, that the money the Olympics brought to Germany? So there are a lot of questions, and Brundage just wasn't going to take no for an answer.
Sure.
He got the mob involved. He wasn't going to take no.
When there's money to be made, I assume.
Yep.
So what's the German preparation for this Olympics? They really didn't have. Spain was in the running for it, but they dropped out. Was that correct? Spain was in the running.
Well, Spain, the vote went Germany's way against Barcelona. So it was Berlin against Barcelona in 31. But as the Nazis took more and more power, there was this idea that maybe Barcelona would again throw the People's Olympiad, because people were really scared of going to Germany.
Sure.
And that really frightened Goebbels. And indeed, what happened was Germany just kept pressing Franco to start the revolution. And so once that started, there was going to be no competition. It was all going to be Berlin. Yeah.
So the Reich Sports Field,
Yep.
does that exist before we pass these Olympics? Does that stadium exist, or is that
No,
created for this Olympics?
no. I mean, the architects of the Berlin Games, and you got to give it to these guys, man. They were
Yeah,
grandiose, and
absolutely.
they wanted to turn Berlin into like ancient Rome. So these coliseums that they built and all these athletic centers, I mean, they were beautiful and ahead of their time, very, very modern. So, and these guys weren't necessarily Nazis,
Sure,
they were
sure.
employed, they were paid by the Nazis to do these projects. Every country wants to put their best foot forward, you know, um, whether, when, I mean, and if you look back in recent history, China, Russia, Brazil, they all did a lot of horrible things to their cities to clean them up and get them ready for the Olympics.
And then where they are after a year later is a whole nother
It's
story.
a whole nother thing.
That's your next book. What happens to these sites, which is a passion of mine. I always love to look at the sites after the Olympics and what
Look
they
at
look like.
Bosnia Herzegovina. I mean,
Wow.
it's like completely shattered or overrun. I mean, you would never think an Olympics happened there, and most people don't even remember that it did happen there.
Right.
You know?
So, what does the training look like for a 1930s German athlete? Because we get Hitler's plan. We're going to show our dominance, and I think people get lost in this. People think Hitler gets a little egg on his face because Jesse Owens dominates the Olympics, but when you look at the medal count, this is a German victory.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but before we get to that, what is 17, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old athlete, what's their daily, what's their day to day? Are they being fed the best food, best trainers, housed? How were they found? What can you tell us about the athletes?
I mean, these were kids just like Americans. They worked really hard during school. They became the best of the best. We have quite a few of our main characters are some of the German athletes. Some of them were more pressed by the Nazis to perform. Some of them were used as pawns to just get the Americans there and then kicked off the team, which is Gretel Bergman.
Right.
She was the best high jumper in the whole world, but she happened to be a German Jew, and they used her as a pawn and kicked her off as
Wow.
soon as the Americans got on the boat. So there was some pressure, and Luz Long, who competed directly against Jesse Owens in the long jump, this was a young man who just wanted to be the best at his event, and
Yep.
he was not a warring kid, but unfortunately, he was forced to be a Nazi and ended up dying in the war. And, these are heartbreaking stories, man, that we tell about not only, not only some of the American athletes, because they were crushed as well by Brundage and some of the others, but these German athletes, they were just used and abused.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
jump to lose. Let's talk about him. He's
Yeah.
absolutely a fascinating character. So
Yeah.
his real name's Carl, right?
Yep.
But he goes by
Carl
Luz,
Lose Long. Yeah, Carl Lose Long. Yeah, yeah.
and he
And
is the
yeah,
he's the German long jump champion for years. And
yeah,
he ends up taking the silver to Owens at this Olympics, but
yeah.
that's not the story that everyone talks about. I guess the story goes something like this: in the pre-trials, Owens fouls down
A
to
few
his last
times.
foul. Right,
Yep.
he's not on the board, which
Nope.
is a bit. I always say so. My children are track athletes, and I always say you got to get on the board the one time. Get on the board, then you
Then you
can
can work.
right. Then you can take some chances. Got to get on the
Yes.
boards.
Right.
I guess as the legend goes, well, Luz comes up to him, gives him some advice: jump early, get on the board. You're gonna make the next round, and then you can go to work. He does. He qualifies. Grantland Rice claims that story didn't happen, but I do believe Owens turned around and said it absolutely happened.
Well, I mean, he stayed in touch with Luz's son. There's pictures of it. So
Right.
I don't know who could have said it. It didn't happen. there is a picture of Luz laying close on the ground at the Olympic field right next to him. That had never been done before. That's what really incensed Hitler and the Nazis. So, and they were talking about that very thing. So I've never heard anyone say it didn't happen because there's footage that it did happen. I
Sure.
mean, Leni Riefenstahl got it on camera.
Okay.
I don't like these naysayers who
Right.
want to put down something beautiful that happened because that guy won a special award because he helped Jesse.
Right.
The Pierre de Coubertin award for sportsmanship. I don't understand. I've never heard this. I don't know why anyone would say that didn't happen because it definitely happened.
Well, Grant Lynn Rice's reporting was for always the sensational, I guess.
I mean, I guess so, but let's don't put down a really great story
Absolutely.
and about sportsmanship here. I mean, that was a German and a Black American, and that brought the world together in that one moment. It was a great moment.
Owen's fault on that third jump or that last jump
It's done.
loses the gold medalist. Is that correct?
Yeah,
I mean, he's going to
absolutely.
go on to be the gold medalist.
That is absolutely right.
So, let's talk about the attitude of Germany to not only just Black Americans, Black athletes, because do they have the same resentment to the Jewish athlete? I've read that sometimes they looked at them in awe, they marveled at them, they were unsure of them. And was there that same racist propaganda that maybe you would anticipate today from like a neo-Nazi perspective to a Black American? Did they look at that same way? Did they look at the Black American as a Jew on the same footing, or was it?
Yeah, they thought they were animals.
Yeah.
Yeah, they thought they were animals. I mean, it was on par. They thought the Jews were animals, and they thought the blacks, they were calling them monkeys. I mean, it's just a horrible thing. They were all about white Aryan supremacy. That's what they were preaching. They didn't want American Black people coming in here into Berlin and winning any kind of medals. But indeed, because it happened often on the track, it happened often. Once it got to the 4x100, which is the big race at the end of the track portion of the Olympics, there were two Americans who were Jews on that team, and they were the only two Jews on the whole American Olympic team, and they were kicked off the morning of their race. And they were forced by Brundage to do that because he had been told by the Nazi Karl Ritter von Holt, who was on the International Olympic Committee, that Hitler had been able to stomach the blacks, the American blacks, winning gold.
Sure.
But do you really have to force a couple of Jews down his throat? And they basically said, I got you on the IOC, I can kick your ass off the IOC. Marty Glickman, who was a famous sports announcer, he was one of the runners. And Sam Stoller, they were the only two Jews, and they got kicked off the morning of. And that's how Jesse Owens got his fourth medal, by the way. And, many in that meeting that morning, many of the runners stood up and said, hey, put these guys in, man. They've been practicing, for months and months. Jesse did not say anything. Jesse knew the only way to get a fourth gold and make history was to be in that race. Now, look, I'm not saying it's good or bad. He was a competitor. He wanted the gold. He made history and did a lot of great things for civil rights. But he did not speak up in that meeting for the Jews that were on the American team.
That's very fascinating.
So, those are some of the stories in the book that,
did that ever come back to haunt him, do you think? Or did that ever get kind of addressed?
Well, certainly, Marty, he was such a great teammate, that he was I believe he was one of the only white Olympic team members that showed up to Jesse's funeral. And he was one of the coffin carriers.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, I don't think anyone held a grudge because, they were all young and competitors and they wanted to win, but and to put it fairly, some of the other black athletes tried to speak up and they were put in their place by the assistant coach, Dean Cromwell, who was the USC coach, who was a huge racist and a huge anti-Semite. Anything Jesse would have said wasn't going to help anyone.
Right.
You know.
So, well, isn't that you're a racist in the sport of track where you're going to be surrounded by athletes of all backgrounds, but I
Even
guess
back then.
old that right,
Yeah.
old
Yeah.
habits die hard, I guess. And
Yeah. Absolutely.
what a shame. What a shame.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's take a step back. Let's talk about the Jewish athletes who were going, and let's talk about America's decision to go. I kind of equate this, not to trivialize it, but sometimes you're planning that summer barbecue and you send out the invitation in April. Mm-hmm. And then as the barbecue gets a little closer, you start saying, oh, this guy we invited, he's not dating Lucy anymore. He's found out a few things, but we've already invited. So, we committed 1931. We're going to Germany. They're going to build this complex. And now, I mean, the world is watching. And we had all the secrets haven't spilled, but there's concerns. There's concerns all over the world of what's going on.
Absolutely.
How close? Well, first off, what countries did any countries pull out? Which countries pulled out on us?
I don't know exactly, but there were definitely countries that did not go.
Okay, and now
and more importantly, there were athletes that were involved in countries that did not go.
So who knows where those placements could have looked like if those athletes show up.
Absolutely.
And we'll get to this later, but people also realize, too, another reason why this Olympics is so special is you're not going to see another Olympics for 12 years, right? You're not going to see another Olympics for 12 years.
That's why it was heartbreaking for Marty Glickman. He was 18 years old, and the coach was like, you'll have other Olympics. He was 30 by the time the next Olympics happened. Right. He was never going to see another Olympics.
How close do you realistically think Great Britain, the United States, these other countries were to say, you know what, we're not going?
Oh, it was very close in America. I mean, if it wasn't for Brundage putting the pressure on the voters of the Amateur Athletic Union, the American Amateur Athletic Union, if he didn't put that kind of pressure on them, we would have voted against going. I mean, it was a very close vote to begin with, but indeed we voted to go, and that every country was waiting for us. Every civilized country was waiting to see if we were going to go. And even though we voted yes, Brundage still believed his friends in Germany when they said the best athletes are going to participate, right, including, Gretel Bergman, which, of course, the moment they got there, they broke the news to Brundage, Gretel has a hamstring pull.
Wow.
Well, he knew right away he had been used.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, but it was very close. Very, very close.
What do you think the American public's reaction would have been if America did not go? Do you think they would have said, you know what, you're doing the right thing? Or would they have said, we're America. We don't back down from challenges. We don't talk. What do you think? What do you think at the time period looked like? Do you think we would have taken a lot of slack politically as a country if we're not going there?
I don't believe we would have taken a lot of slack. I believe that it was pretty down the middle whether we should go or not, and whether, because, I mean, they were Nazi rallies in New York City at right. Madison Square Garden. I mean, people were behind it. Hearst and Pulitzer, I mean, these guys were anti-Semitic. They were in favor of what was going on in Germany. So, I mean, it was hard to say what the press was going to say in general. I know that our main character, our main protagonist, is Alan Gould, and he was the sports editor for the AP. And like, this is a good man, like he knew everything that was going on. He was friendly with the athletes. He traveled the world. He knew what was happening. He was in tune. He knew politicians. They were getting back to him. So, and he hated Brundage.
Yep.
Hated his guts.
So he knew the realities. He knew the realities early.
He knew the realities, and he was talking about it. So, even though he wanted to go because he knew it would be such a global spectacle, right. Inner turmoil of his own was whether he thought they should go or not, because he believed in the athletes. He knew that they were going to win, He really believed in the athletes that he covered, but he also knew what was going on and what he was being told by Judge Jeremiah Mahoney and Ambassador Dodd and Janke from the IOC, who was the American guy from the IOC before Brundage got him kicked out and he took over. So I mean, all these horrible things happened right before the Olympics started. It's just, you gotta read it because it's so dramatic. I'm telling your listeners, please do, because the stories that just happen they're eye opening. It's
Yep.
shocking.
So, ironically, my graduate thesis was on Hearst and Pulitzer, so I'm fully aware of the antics that was my graduate thesis.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
exactly.
let's talk about Gould, your protagonist. Who is he? How did he get to this position? How did you get his perspectives to be able to, and I guess this is one of those stories. I always come back, I love Friday Night Lights. I always say that's like my
Yeah.
I've read it, I've listened to, but I said that's the model. You can't take everyone in a story like this. It's too big. So you have to find a handful of characters who have certain characteristics or have certain perspectives, and you have to tell the story through them. You can't hit everybody. It's impossible. You have to. So who is he? What was one of the reasons why you said this is going to be kind of the guy who's our de facto narrator?
Yeah, well, we did a lot of research on him. He just had such an amazing moral compass, and he was really involved with the athletes of the time, and he was super whip smart. I mean, he started the AP top 25 college football. I mean, this guy was so smart
Oh yeah.
and so in tune with what was going on in the sports world globally. And he was a good guy. He wore a bow tie. He was married and faithful with two children. And the more and more research we did, we said, you know what, we want this guy to be our guy. And being the AP, he knew he just had his hands everywhere and could make a call and just, it would get answered or people were calling him to give him the info, you know. So, and he hated Brundage, which was awesome. It was awesome. They were literally adversaries. So it was like, it was perfect. And, honestly, I really liked his very strong moral compass.
Well, listen, very intuitive. You talked about the invention of the 25 and the list, and
Yeah.
it's funny. People always say, "My God, it's February. We already have next season's list." How can you read it? Didn't you? You read it,
Yeah,
didn't
right.
you?
Yeah.
People don't understand the life of a
Yeah.
daily reporter. It's easy when it's the Super Bowl. It's easy when it's the
Sure.
national. 4 days later, and you got nothing to, people
Yeah.
still want to read something. So he's always been a guy that I admire. Journalists should admire. What was
Yeah.
their interactions? Were they regularly speaking? Was this just a dissension from a distance? What?
No. Oh no, they spoke often. Because Alan was covering the games, both the winter and the summer games for the AP, and so
Mm-hmm.
he traveled to LA and covered those games, and then he went to Germany, and he was going to go to Germany the whole time, and so he was on top of things, and he knew what was going on, and he was in favor of a boycott secretly. Like
Wow.
yeah, I mean he kept hearing horrible stories from Dodd and Janke. I mean, there was horrible things going on. People were getting their ass beat. Americans were getting beaten up there just for not saluting in a Nazi way. So it was madness. And you see this madness through the Dodd family in the book. They're right in the middle of Berlin. You see this madness just growing and growing and growing and getting worse like a cancer. So, yeah, it's Dodd and Brundage were at each other's throats often.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's talk. We're both media men coming from that world.
Yep.
A lot of firsts for this Olympics. First
Yep.
televised Olympics.
That's correct. Yeah.
What is so? Does it doesn't make it to America, but it's in Europe, correct? Does it make it to America or
No,
it's just
no.
just
It
in
was
Europe?
only in Germany.
Only in
So only
Germany.
in different cities in Germany and different parts of Berlin. Yeah, it was very limited because remember, these cameras were like
Of course.
obviously not the cameras you're carrying now. These things were as big as like the side of a house.
Right.
So you couldn't do much with them, and they were all, big tubes. And so there wasn't a lot of mobility with it. But yeah, it was the first televised. And what's funny is Leni Riefenstahl, who did the famous Olympia, who covered the
Right.
games, and is just one of the more famous filmmakers ever. She's one of the main characters in the book too.
Yep.
And she hated the fact she she hated the fact that there was going to be television cameras and not movie cameras. She couldn't
Co-
stand it.
competition wise, or from
Yeah,
from an artistic perspective.
both,
Yeah.
absolutely. She and it's funny. Gould traveled with one of the reporters from the New York Times on Kieran, who was also a very famous reporter, and he's one of our characters, and he's a very good friend of Gould, and he makes a comment, says to Gould, that is the future of our job,
100%.
and I mean, he couldn't have been more right.
Yep.
Right? I mean, television now makes deals with sports, and that's where the money comes from, and it's like it's
Of
so
course.
ingrained. That's one of the prescient things about this book. You see the future in so many ways.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So what before the advent of television, so this really wasn't like now where these cities are bidding for these sites because they want to make millions and millions. This was more of a showcase of
Yeah.
the German resurrection, and then it
Yes.
was it was just kind of a added bonus that now we're filmed. But you can't say the Germans didn't have that foresight of we're gonna film this, we're gonna die, we're gonna record this, we're gonna make
Everything was propaganda. Everything was propaganda. I mean, Leni got paid very well. Leni never became a Nazi, but she certainly got a lot of money from him.
right.
And you know what? I mean, you cannot look at her films and think these are just pieces of crap. I mean,
Right.
they're just artistic genius.
Uh,
So it really is,
and
and if you everything after every Olympics after that was covered and shot, and filmed and made into a documentary. So she set the standard for sports documentary filmmaking in general. Yeah, so it is. I would consider that to be the first full-length sports documentary.
Now, is it
Yes.
also true that that video was used as a teaching tool for how to do some of these events? I've read that people have not only just studying for the making, but saying, "Hey,
Right.
this is how you do it. This is what an Olympian is supposed to look like."
Well, I mean that could have been true for 12 years later when the next Olympics happened. I mean certainly she covered every inch of most every event, especially some of the bigger events were like you would never know, but the high jump, that was just such a, and we detailed that event in the book. None of these people that were involved are main characters in our book, other than Leni covering it. But it's so exciting,
Yep.
and there is also a great moment of sportsmanship in that story as well. So we don't shy away from going play by play in the Olympics. That's what's great in this book is once once we decide to go and the Americans get there, then it changes from chapter to day one,
Yep.
and we're in the Olympics, baby. Like
Well,
we're living the moment.
let's talk about day one.
Yeah.
So, the torch run to Greece,
Yeah.
never done before.
Right, first of its kind. So another thing in this Olympics that really set the standard. Yeah.
So here comes the German thought of more
It,
grandiose. No, we're going to
that
run.
was
So let's talk about
that
that.
was a Jewish person's thought.
Okay.
So Theodore Liebald was one of the main people that put together these Olympics, but he got kicked off right before the Americans got there because they found him to be part Jew. So he got kicked off the team of putting it together, and Carl Dean, who was his buddy, his underling, he took
Mm-hmm.
over. It was Leewald's idea, and he got it because he was at a dinner party, with a bunch of his Jewish friends. And though he was not a big Jew, his friends were, and they were passing a candle to each of them around the room and then around the table. And then when the last person got the candle, they lit a bigger candle in the middle of the table.
Wow.
So that's where he got the idea of a global lighting. And it's brilliant, right? It's
It
brilliant.
really
I mean,
is. It
and
really is.
it means so much. It's so symbolic. But and I'm proud to say a Jew thought of that. I really am proud to say
Right.
that, man.
Right.
I mean, certainly the Nazis made it a grandiose moment. They definitely did. But yeah, that's from the mind of a Jew.
And then, oh man! Also to symbolize the unity of all these countries peacefully competing against each other, thrown in the middle of,
Yeah,
anger, hatred, resentment.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, what happens during the games, it's not just, the sport, and we really do call the sports really, we're very enthusiastic about it, but there was a lot of bad politics and a lot of like backstreet deals that were going on during the games that we show, and it's pretty heartbreaking and it's very tense. I mean, you're like, God, is someone going to get hurt here?
Right.
Gould takes chances when he's there. He wants to find out what the hell is going on.
How does not just the Americans, but I guess everyone coming into Germany, we're in 100,000 we're in 100,000 people stadium right now.
Yeah.
What is the what is the feeling inside the stadium of the person watching this? I mean, are they just here like I'm interested, or are they, is this
Oh,
the
yeah.
This is the Coliseum, I assume.
Yes. That they were. I mean, everybody was into it. I mean, imagine. You're even if you're not political, this is your city hosting the biggest event in the world, quite possibly in history.
Right.
And they felt it. It was like everybody was so happy, and I mean, there was a lot of nationalism going on. Believe me, they were there to root for their Germans, but it was a spectacle. So, I don't think. I don't know. I mean, yeah, they had to give the Heil Hitler, and they got caught up in all that crap. But, I think that it was a lot of people who wanted to really watch great sport,
Sure.
because there were people from all over the world there. It wasn't just Germans. So I think everybody was there, just like any other a Coliseum at any other Olympics. They were there to watch good sport.
Can we talk about Marjorie for a little bit?
Yeah, she's my favorite character in the whole book. I got to tell you.
She's
You know,
she's
yeah,
13 years old. This
yeah,
is right. She's 13.
yeah,
High diving, right? She's in the high
yeah.
dive.
She's in the
She
platform high dive. Yeah.
and she is still to this day that record. Is she still the youngest gold medalist for that event?
Certainly in that event, I'm almost positive she's still.
Almost
Yes,
for
I'm
everything,
almost
right?
positive.
She's still
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was. I mean, I think Nadia Comaneci was what 15 or something, and Olga Korbut was young, but I don't. I think they were still older than Marjorie. Yeah.
tell everybody about her. Where does she
All right.
come from?
So imagine a eighth grader from California. All American looking, blonde haired, blue eyed, freckle, and being the most dominant force in your sport, and being the sweetest person. Never never a mean bone. When it came time for competition, she didn't ever harass her competition. She just didn't say anything. But when it came to the Olympics, there were two swimmers who had won silver and gold previously: Catherine Poynton Hill and Rollins, Catherine Rollins and Dorothy Poynton Hill, and they were older than her, and they were her competition. And when she first met them, she was just like in awe. She was younger. She had just joined the circuit, and they didn't know, and they passed her off as like this skinny little runt that thought
Sure.
she was going to be in the 36 Olympics. And yet when the time came, they were shocked because when the trials came, she beat the crap out of them, and they were not happy. And she never lost her composure. You know, there are just certain characters when you're writing that you really fall in love with, and
Absolutely.
she definitely was one of them. I mean, her grit and the way like she befriended John Woodruff, who was one of the runners, who was much older than her, and a black guy, poor black guy from Connellsville, Pennsylvania. They become fast friends, and they root for each other, and like it just became this really beautiful friendship. And Marjorie was just, she was beloved all over Berlin. People followed her. Everybody was in love with this little girl, and I certainly fell in love with her writing for her.
I'm sure. And what, I'm the team initially. You have to doubt her, right? Here's this little girl. You have
Yeah,
to
they didn't
doubt
like
her.
her.
Yeah, you have to doubt
Yeah,
her.
yeah,
And then she posts times where if you're not in that room, you're saying, "I want to see it again." I want to see the score again because it just
yeah.
doesn't add up.
Oh yeah, no, she was great. And what's great is they finally, the other two women had to make a pact with her and just say, okay, we get it.
Right.
Now let's just sweep the Germans. And they did.
So when and then what does her competition think? Like, is that somebody's little sister? Like, this isn't an Olympian. Like, how much overconfidence must have been there?
Now, it took
Now,
one dive. It took one dive. She was 13 years old. She probably weighed like, 55 pounds. She probably
right.
made no splash at all. They were probably crapping their pants.
Yep.
Think
Yep.
about it, They were like, oh, how do we compete with this? Because they were all college age,
Right.
right? So they
The,
were bigger.
that's always one of those things about sports where sometimes you view, track or wrestling or and you look at the person and you say, I don't think so. And then all of a sudden they do something so incredible and you say,
Yeah.
man, I'm in trouble.
Yeah,
I'm in trouble.
Marjorie didn't even give the Germans and the Chinese time to even consider that she wasn't worthy. I mean, she nailed it right on her first dive. She was in the lead. So, I mean, it was like, yeah, no.
How much, because of World War II, does Marjorie get erased from being what could have been? I mean, she could have probably, at 13, she could have probably dominated
Yeah.
a handful of other Olympics.
Yeah.
What ends up happening to Marjorie after the,
Well, she still dominates the national circuit for
okay.
years. So, I mean, she didn't just fade away. But
Right.
obviously, she never participated in the Olympics again, which is like, it's shame on the Olympics,
Right.
Just shame on Germany. It's just like the whole thing was just a total unbelievable.
By 48 she wasn't interested to go back 12 years later? Didn't want to do it?
She was too old. I mean, she was already 25 years old. Think about it. 25 years old. Oh, plus, back then, you couldn't be older than college age. You had to be a collegiate athlete or younger. You could not be a professional in any way or ever
Right.
have accepted money. So it's not like it is today. And I remember that as a kid, because that didn't change until like the 80s or 90s.
Right,
And
absolutely.
that was right. And there was something very pure and beautiful about that in the Olympics.
100%.
Yeah, right. It really will.
100%.
That's what made the 1980 hockey team so great.
Oh,
That's what made so many of these basketball teams so great. They were college kids, and they would just dominated. That's what made Ali great. That's what made Cinder great. Like, come on, man. They were just America's got a lot of talent in college. We never needed to throw pros at it.
no, it's I still the 80 Olympics is still what that team that you wrote. Listen, you write something like that for your next. They say, nah, come on now, we got to make this realistic here.
Yeah.
There's another swimmer I want to throw by you,
Yeah.
because to my knowledge, she's still the youngest medalist in the history of the Olympics, and that's Inga Sorensen from Denmark, I believe it is.
Yeah.
She's breaststroke. She's a bronze. She's 12. How incredible.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I don't really know too much about her, I have to say. I mean, and she was in the 36 Olympics.
Yeah. Apparently
She
she's
was.
in the 36, and
Yeah, that's great.
I was doing this late night research, and I was saying youngest medalist, and here's this 12-year-old girl.
That's great, right?
Yep.
I mean, and that's pure sport, right, Mike? Like, that's
Totally.
it. Like, God, when you're 12 and 13 years old and you're going to get to the heights of being the best, that's drive that, not very many kids have.
No. Yeah, no. Talk about butterflies. No. Talk about butterflies
Right?
when you're going out to your rec game or going up.
Yeah.
You're in front of
Imagine your first kiss. I mean, yeah, I was dying. Like I
Yeah,
couldn't even
yeah,
imagine going up in front of 100,000 people trying to win.
believable.
Yeah.
Did we get to Hendrika? Did we talk about is she the Dutch swimmer? She had a dominant performance at the Olympics.
Yeah, as far as the swimming goes,
Just so
we covered Eleanor Holm, who is one of the bigger storylines of the whole book, and that's another character that I really fell in love with. And what happened to her was just
tell us
another
about her.
heartbreaker. Well, she was the best uh, backstroker in the world, and she had won gold in 32 in LA, and she was going to do the same in 36. But Brundage saw her as a sex object, and on the boat over tried to basically rape her,
My
and
lord.
she beat the shit out of him. And when they got, I mean, think about it. She was a premier athlete, and he was like 42 years old. Though he was not in bad shape, he was no premier athlete anymore. And so she got to him. And so when they got to when they got to Berlin, he said, "You're off the team," and he kicked her off the team. And it was Alan Gould who took her in and made her a reporter to
Wow.
cover the swimming and diving. Now think about that. Nowadays, you have ex-athletes being reporters all the time covering these
Yeah.
events. She was the first, and it was
Unbelievable.
Alan Gould who did that. And so it's a beautiful, because in the book they're friends throughout. He loves her like a daughter,
Right.
and so it comes full circle that he saves her and keeps her there to cover the games, even though he knows that she's heartbroken. So, I mean, that was the swimmer that we really concentrated on. And
Sure.
yeah, the Dutch were dominant.
Yeah.
That much I know. They really dominated, and they dominated the backstroke. I think it was Osendarp, I believe. I don't know if she won the gold, but I know that she was up there. But Eleanor would have won.
Lord.
Eleanor would have won. It would have been another gold medal for the U.S. team. But Brundage didn't give a shit. It was all about Avery. You know.
The stories now that are coming, if these things happen now of athletes being dismissed over these issues, I mean, talk about the uproar where now it just
I know.
seems the balance of power just seems so skewed and it just, you know what, that's it. You're out. You're Jewish, you're out. You are a woman and you said no to me, you're out, and
Yeah.
I guess there was nowhere to go with it at that point.
Basically, there was nothing Gould could do in the press because she had been very promiscuous on the boat with married men, and she was married herself.
Okay.
So, even though yes, he did try to do this, and she fought off his advances, she definitely got the better of him. But people knew that she was kind of like stateroom hopping, and
Right.
there was nothing Gould could do, like he wanted to. So he took her in, and that was the best he could do. And she was very thankful for that. But yeah, back then there was no recourse, right? I mean,
Right.
money talked and bullshit walked. If you
Totally.
didn't have that, if you didn't have the money or the power, nothing was going to happen. As we said before, when the African American athletes tried to speak up for the two Jewish athletes, they were put in their place pretty damn quickly. You know, back then there wasn't a lot of recourse.
Right.
Yeah.
Isn't it? So the Soviet Union says we're not going. And since when is the Soviet Union the pillar of purity and says, you know what? What's going on is wrong. How much did that shake up the games? I mean, that's a powerhouse. That's, the training. And the Soviet Union says we're not going. Did anyone care? I mean, did anyone care, or were Americans and
Well,
Germans relieved? Did
no,
they?
the Americans wanted it. They wanted them there. They didn't care. I mean, they weren't enemies. They were allies.
Right.
I mean, even back
I meant
then. But
from a competitive
well, I
sort, because
mean,
they're
no,
sending
no,
good
no, no,
evidence.
no, because the Americans wanted to beat everybody. They
Got it.
wanted to win. They didn't want anyone to say, well, the Russian guy didn't compete, so you would have never won that. They didn't want that crap. They
Right.
wanted to win, and they wanted to beat everybody and tell everybody that they beat everybody. and
Got
that's
it.
how they got the gold. I mean, that's how you want to win, right?
Sure, sure, totally.
But
What?
but it did hurt Germany. But the thing is, you know, there was one scourge in Berlin, and that was communism. And Hitler hated communism, and he killed people for their mere implication of being one. So there was no love lost between the Soviet Union and Germany.
No.
And then, of course, years later, Germany turned their back on a pact, and that's why Russia went to war against Germany. So I mean,
Yep.
there was no love lost there,
Yep.
none.
So, do you think? Obviously, the people believe it, and as an athlete, you have to believe that you can win. But did 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 the high end of Germany really think that they were going to dominate this Olympics the way they did, or were they just kind of like, please, I mean, they dominate. I mean, I'm looking at medal counts. I mean, the
Yeah,
numbers are scary.
yeah. I mean,
Total medals: Germany 101,
yeah,
United States 57. I
yeah.
mean, that's whoa. We're
So
behind.
what really pissed off Germany was they didn't win any of the speed events. We did,
Ah, got
right?
it.
They won like the events where you're throwing a discus or a
Yep.
big heavy ball, you
Yep.
know, and they were happy about that because
Right.
they were the strength events. But we beat them in all the speed events.
Right.
And in cycling, the French, Robert Charpentier, he beat them in speed. So the Germans never really won any of the speed events, and that really pissed off Hitler and Goebbels.
Gotcha.
But again, there was nothing to be really too pissed off. Oh, and the Americans won in the rowing, obviously, and those guys are characters in our book too. It pissed them off, but how can you debate, you know, 100 and something?
Yeah. That.
Hitler wanted Austria to win soccer, and he did everything he could, and there was a huge debacle in that. And there was just by the end, you can only cheat so much. You know, really.
What is
Even if FIFA's going along with you,
right?
you can
Right.
only
Wait,
cheat so
whoa.
much.
And they're
And they were
certainly.
doing it back then, Mike.
I,
They were
I
doing it back then.
I believe it. I believe it with less watchmen than there are now. So at least
Absolutely.
now we know we know what's going, or at least we think we know. But back then, I'm sure it was much more quieter, or less people were able to expose those things. There wasn't a chat room saying,
Exactly.
"Oh my God, how the hell is this
Yeah.
happening?"
Yeah. No, I
What
mean,
what is
this
Hitler
wasn't
and, Goebbels' reaction when Owens and the American track team are starting to win these events? What
well, I mean, they were disgusted. Happily, in our favor,
Sure.
they were very disgusted because, they did go into the Olympics thinking they were going to kick butt, and they didn't think that the blacks were as good as the Americans were saying. They just never thought they could compete on such a level. They thought they were stupid.
Right.
They thought they were untalented and raw. And even when they were beating them, Goebbels was turning to Brundage and saying, "Your monkeys are beating us. You're not beating us." It was like, they just couldn't accept the fact that they were getting their ass beaten some of these events by people that didn't look white.
The boxing
Yes.
championship
Yeah. Huh?
to Joe Louis, and all of a sudden now you're in you're in the war. You're jumping out of planes. You're going on the front lines.
Yeah.
Does Carl Long face that same resentment after what happened? A, losing. B, being a sportsman to a black American. Is he kind of pushed into the front line of battle or dangerous situations, and
Yeah.
he's killed. He's killed 1943, I believe, right? He's killed young
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Is if he's the gold medalist, is he going off to that war?
No.
Probably not, right?
No, he's not. No, he wouldn't. But I mean, there's got to be a winner and there's got to be a loser. And, you know, if you're a good sportsman, you want to win the best way possible. If you see your competitor doing something stupid every single time, you're going to be like, don't do that.
Right.
I mean, if you're a good competitor, you want to win on your own merit.
Totally.
And he didn't hate Jesse. These people didn't hate each other. They were young people that they were so happy and thrilled to be living together for 2 weeks and learning about each other's culture. And that's just something Brundage and the Nazis just didn't expect to see.
Right.
And that's what happens with young people. You put them in a college atmosphere and they're going to want to be friendly towards each other and
Totally.
help each other and root for each other.
What happened to
And,
the the black Americans, the women, the people of Jewish descent? What happens when they return to America after a successful outing? How are they do they come back and say, well, I guess that was for naught?
no, I think that they were very proud of themselves and their teammates for sure. But again, these black athletes were treated like shit.
Right.
I mean, they were treated as if they didn't do anything.
Yep.
I mean, they were happy and they were college graduates. And they many of them went and became soldiers and veterans and heroes, and they still weren't given the time of day, even when they came back from the war, having won gold.
Right.
Years before. I mean, it just didn't matter. I mean, that's how bad racism in America was and is. It's just more, people keep it a little more quiet now, and Trump doesn't help it because he brings out that kind of thing in people,
Right.
and he makes it viable to do, and so it's just like, it's just so sad to know that these kids were going through that garbage, and they were kids, man.
Oh, yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, that's what it really comes down to. They were kids.
With the world on their shoulders, and they probably didn't even realize it until they're there and they see the crowd and they see what Germany has built, and they say,
Yeah.
well, this is, it's one thing to go to win, do my best and be the best I can be and represent my country, but as you're training and as the years clicked on and war maybe became inevitable or something's not right here, and they started saying this is a lot bigger than what we thought. We thought we were just going to be. I thought I was going to run 100. I thought I was going to run 100 meters.
Yeah, I mean, some of the athletes had participated 4 years earlier, but yeah, I don't think that they really. I mean, they were psyched when they got there. I mean, when
Right.
the opening ceremonies, they were like,
Yep.
"My God, this is great." I mean, I don't think college kids are as intimidated as adults. Like
Sure.
especially when they've been to championships and the world championships and national championships, and I mean, those kids had to go through the same thing that the athletes have to today to get to the
Right.
Olympics. So, they had been to big places. I mean, this was just on such a grand scale because of where it was and who it was. And yeah, I'm sure many of them were initially intimidated, but they were such good athletes and so focused that once it got to like the starting block, they were ready to go, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
there's a job. There's a job to do, and
yeah, and the
here
research
we
we
are.
did, the American athletes were just so focused, man. So focused.
Being an American Olympic athlete is really interesting if you read into the history of how other countries prepared Olympians as opposed to how Americans prepared Olympians. And I remember like reading like Foxcatcher about Schultz on the Olympic team, and he's like, I'm taking a job at Oklahoma State just to have a partner, realizing with these other countries where you're in a compound and you're training for it. So the fact that
Right.
America still didn't even treat the Olympics the way these other countries did, and
Yeah, no, they didn't.
and to still then have the type of talent to get there and be successful is
Uh,
really says so much about who these people were.
Oh, wait, let me tell you, Mike, in the book, you can see that the Germans actually prepared their athletes much better because they, as a group, had all these facilities all over Germany that were brand new, and as a collective, they were helping them. But America wasn't like that. It was all
No.
like, can you give me some money here, and
Right.
the the American Olympic Committee was looking for some money here, and like it just didn't work as swiftly as it does today.
Right.
easily. The money doesn't come as easily as it does today.
I think it took. I mean, it took years for America to catch up Olympic wise too.
I agree
It took
completely, and
years, decades. Took
I don't think
decades.
they did it until the '80s.
I
I
agree.
really don't. I don't think they did it until like late '80s.
People don't recognize. So I'm, I'm 12, 13 when the Dream Team rolls out, and all of a
Yeah,
sudden you say, "Oh wow, this is a whole new ball game."
yeah.
But
It
before
changed
that,
everything.
it did, and
Yeah.
I don't think America wanted to do it, but I think they felt that the way the Soviets really
Yes.
and the East Germans really
Yeah.
took the Olympics to new levels, where you're
Yeah.
getting a stipend, you're getting housing. This is
Yeah.
your job, and that was unlike the American Olympic athlete, where
Oh.
trying to find a sponsor
Yeah, it was
and
very tough, Very tough. It was always grassroots. It was very
yeah,
grassroots for the Americans.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Which always makes Olympic athlete stories from the 50s, 60s, 70s so incredible, because these
Yeah.
people are coming out of nowhere,
Yeah.
training in the most bare bones
I mean,
situation.
and if you think about one of the main characters in our book is Glenn Morris, who was the decathlete who ended up having a torrid romance with Leni Riefenstahl, and then going on to win the gold, like shocking the world
Think he had a
in the
good month?
decathlon.
Think he had a
No
good
kidding,
month?
no doubt. But poor guy
Yep.
from the central of America, and poor as hell, a bean farmer. His father like
Unbelievable.
literally grew beans and cabbages, and I mean he came from nothing.
Right.
They were from Dakota.
Right.
This guy became like the best athlete in the world.
Unbelievable.
Those are great stories
Yep.
about American non-professional Olympiads. And when you are our age and you grew up with that, there's like Cassius Clay, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like watching him box. No one was giving him money.
Nope.
They were just trying to raise money. I mean, Christ, if they had to sell cupcakes on a corner, they were
Yeah.
willing to do it.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
just do you remember the Dan and Dave? I guess that was '88, and Dan and
yeah, yeah,
Dave,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah,
one
yeah,
of them didn't even end up qualifying for the
yeah.
for the thing. But
Exactly.
that was the first time I remember seeing like America's treating the Olympics as a little. Now we're a
They
little bit
started to
just
outfit them.
absolutely. We're
Yeah,
going to
like
be
give
under the
them
Nike
training.
banner
Right, give
and
them training camps to go to, and
yep.
like they never had that. They never had that.
1936 is also the introduction of basketball to the Olympics.
Yeah, it was and baseball, as a matter of fact.
Really?
But it was all non-competition, right? It wasn't for a medal,
Got it.
so it was like they were testing it out.
Got it.
Yeah, yeah, and the Americans won. I don't really know how the basketball went because, like I said, it was just non-competition. So,
Right.
but I think that they had a full slate of games.
Yeah. I mean,
I
I
think
can't
they did.
imagine
Yeah.
the rest of the countries, most of the countries in the world were equipped to deal with American basketball.
No, and
even then.
Mike, it was all about football. It was soccer.
Yep.
That was it.
Yep.
That was the premier events that were going on, like as far as team events going on at the Olympics that year. And funny enough, cricket, the Indians were dominant.
Oh,
Dominant. This guy was Priyan Chandra, I think his name is. I think I'm pronouncing it wrong, but the guy was just a marvel to watch, apparently. And that was like, again, the Germans couldn't win the team sports.
right.
They were winning shit like equestrian.
Yep. Right.
Some of the solo sports. And so, America felt pretty damn good walking out of there with their 51 because their 51 were a solid 51.
Sure. So
You know?
on paper, Germany looks like, hey, if you're a stat guy, if you're going through the almanac, you're saying, hey man, this is a German Olympics. But I guess the
Right.
reality is they won all those. Now they'd win all those non-televised events that you didn't even know what the hell they were. And
Right, exactly. Yeah, right.
There's,
Like
there's
walking.
Right. There's 9 guys in the
Speed.
bracket. We won it.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
speed walking, right.
what do you think? Do you think Hitler and Goebbels afterwards said this was a success or this was a failure? What do you think?
No, they found it as a huge success. It brought a lot of money into the war machine. They found it as a huge success. people were excited about it. They even thought, to an extent, it brought validation to their political system
Right.
and all of Germany. They were like, okay, well, the rest of the world loves us now, so we can just go on about our business, our dirty business. So
Right.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
they thought, no, they thought it was a success. Yeah,
And the Olympics we know now have so much to thank for this 1936 Olympics, from
yeah, yeah,
television to the torch
yeah.
to the events. I mean, this was, and was it fair to say this is the modern Olympics breaking through in
I I think
in this
that's
event?
absolutely okay to say.
Okay.
Absolutely, I think it is the birth of the modern spectacle.
But even more interesting now, we're not going to have it for another 12 years. World War II breaks out. I
Yeah.
guess is Olympics in 40 even a consideration, or
Oh yeah, they were voting on it. Yeah, they were
yeah.
voting on it. It was either going to be Rome or Tokyo,
I think Rome
and
would have been a little problematic. A little problematic in Italy.
yeah, but they were going to vote on it. Yeah, it was going to be a thing, and I think actually one of them did win. I think Rome did win.
Really.
Yeah, I think it did. Yeah, I know,
So
crazy, right?
we had 12 years to study this
Yeah,
Olympics for 48. So we're like, this is how we do it, and
yeah,
the birth of the modern spectacle, and here it is.
yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I think 48 was in London, so I think a lot of it took a while for
Sure.
the Olympics to get to a point where it became a spectacle again.
Right.
You know, and even when America hosted in 1980 in Lake Placid, America had a lot of problems in that Olympics. Even just transportation.
Right. Oh
The
yeah.
same with what Brundage had in 32 at Lake Placid. He
Right.
had transportation problems. You know, and so I don't think we learned our lesson until like 88, 92.
Got it.
Yeah.
So some of those sites, they're still standing. That's still standing. And
Yeah, the only thing that is sad is the Olympic Village became uh, barracks for the Germans, and then it became a place where the I think where the Nuremberg prisoners were kept while they
yes.
were on trial. So it's like, it's an unfortunate thing because the man who built that, he was so proud of it, and that's a tragic story as well. So you'll have to read the book because you know some of these people that you would never think had great stories, you're like, oh no, it's really interesting.
There's so many characters. So I'm really hoping, you know, the listeners are looking for something a little different with their Olympic story, and this is the birth of a lot of personality. All these characters, they come from all different walks of life, and there's so many characters to follow. So this is played 1936 Berlin Olympics. Let's talk a little bit about writing, because I've been a writer my whole life, and you've been writing your whole life, and when you sat down and you started laying this out, but was it overwhelming initially, or did you
Yeah, for
say,
me,
you know what, or did you say, I see it already?
no, I mean, I always saw it. It was just a matter of getting it in the chronological order, and that was my doing. That was up to me, and so I'm the one who presented it to Glenn and said, "Hey, this is what we should do, how we should do it, and let's make this happen." And then then we both took to the torch and wrote it. But yeah, I always had a good idea of how it should be laid out. I wanted to tell the true stories of the athletes during the games, especially. Like
Right.
I wanted to tell these races and these events, and because we knew what we were doing was building up to that point. So when we got to the games, it shows the athletes rose above all this chicanery that
Yep.
happened beforehand, and they became the real heroes of everything. And so you don't really know that until you read the book, and then you see what happened before, and that changes your perspective on the games completely. And it
Absolutely.
is a grand spectacle. I mean, visually it is, but even more personally it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what are our goals? What are our plans? We're talks. We want to do a series, right?
Yeah, but we have it in the right hands, and yeah, our goal is to make it into a limited series. We're thinking 10 to 12 episodes. We really want to tell it like the book. We think the book unfolds like a miniseries. So we're very excited, and yeah, our agent is working really hard, to push the people that have it to read it and consider it.
Rick, it's been a blast talking to you about this. I'm excited about it. Played the games of the 1936 Berlin Olympics. Before I let you go, though,
Yep.
you did mention we did talk that your family has some Olympic background. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, so it was my great uncle. I think I mentioned him in the beginning. He was just like one of the best downhill skiers in all the whole world. And my family was from Germany, and in 1936, he wanted to try out for the Garmisch-Partenkirchen Olympics, which were in Bavaria, the 36 Winter Games. He was told no because he was a Jew. He couldn't perform, and the Germans had no Jews on that team. And
Is
that really should have been a harbinger.
sure
People should have taken a
of
look at
things
that.
that, absolutely. Now, is this book in a sense a salute to him?
Yeah, I think it's a salute to the three families that I come from, and I dedicate my portion of the book. My dedication is to the three families that I come from: the Polies, the Kaufmans, and the Esbergs. And I think it's important, to give credence to where you come from, and really that's what this book is all about, right?
Oh yeah,
You don't want to relive history, right? You
right.
want to learn from history.
And as an athlete growing up, the guys that you fight the hardest with are the ones when you see them after and you shake their hand and you say, "Hey, man, you you brought it, man.
Yeah, man.
Thank you for doing that to me and pushing me." And
Exactly. Yeah, and that's what happened here with the athletes. They were young. They wanted to push each other. They wanted to be the best. They all wanted to be the best, and they had a lot of like respect for each other. And you don't see that very often anymore.
the essence, I know the sponsorships, I know the money's there, and I know there's thoughts about going, making a movie about. But in the end, when you're 12 and 13, and you're saying to yourself, maybe I'm good enough to do that. That's not the goal. You're not thinking, I want to make money off of this. I want to be an
No.
Olympian because I want to be up there. I want to be on a podium. I want to have teammates. I want to wear the jacket. I want to wear, even if you listen, there's people going to the Olympics and say, listen, I'm not going to be in Bledvis, but I want to wear that jacket that says my country's name on it, and
Yeah,
it's
man.
something it can't be taken away. So,
No.
Rick, thank you so much. Best of luck to this book. This was a when I was when your publicist reached out to me and sent me the copy and I started reading this, I said, God, there's so many characters. Like this is a show by accident, because there's so many characters.
I
You
know.
know, isn't that the best? Listen, it's one thing when you create the characters. It's another thing when they're there and you're just expanding them and you're breathing life into them to give them an opportunity. So,
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me on, Mike.
Rick, it was a blast. Thank you so much.
All right.
Best of luck with
Thank you.
everything.
All right.
Guys, that's Rick Kaufman, author of Played, the game of the 1936 Berlin Olympics, with Glenn Allen, who couldn't make it. And want to thank Rick for coming on and sharing these stories and these characters. And when you are creating a universe and you have stories to tell and you are blessed with these characters, it's a challenge to live up to the expectations of the character in the story. And Rick really did that. So it was a lot of fun reading this book, and I can't recommend it more. So thank you, everyone, for sticking with us. I told you we wouldn't go past that hour, so this is the 1 hour podcast. I'm Mike Parada. See you again soon. Thank you so much.